Hello my friends and welcome to another interview here on this channel. Today here in our video we will talk with GroovinChip, one of the administrators of Flutter dev channel of the Reddit forum, and he is also creating a bunch of projects and I really would like to share them with you. And so here he is. GroovinChip, hello, nice to see you.
Hi, good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I started already a bit, but please introduce yourself.
So I'm GroovinChip. You might have seen me around before. I'm pretty active in the community. I'm on Twitter a lot. I'm pretty active in our Discord group. I co-moderate that group as well as the Flutter dev subreddit. Yeah, I love Flutter. I'm just everywhere. I love it.
So how long do you already work with Flutter?
It's been almost 2 years. I watched Google I/O 2018 online, saw the presentations about Flutter. It just blew me away, and I knew I had to get into it.
It's very interesting because for me it was the Google I/O 2019, so exactly 1 year after. All right. So what are currently your main projects that you work with Flutter together?
So I have an app in production on the Google Play Store called Call Manager, keeping track of phone calls that you need to make in the future. I found myself, every so often with the need to do that, and I wasn't satisfied with any of the options that I had. So I made this app, and I had actually made it in native Android first. And once I discovered Flutter, I recreated it once I had enough knowledge. It took me 5 days. It's pretty great. It's pretty great. Yeah. I have a widget package on pub.dev called GroovinWidgets. And every so often, when I've either modified an existing widget to a way that that I need to use it, or if I've created something from scratch that I needed, I'll stick it in that package.
Yeah.
I am working on some other projects that have not gone to production yet. I've been working on an app called Solo Social, which is basically meant to address the hesitation of posting on social media. So like, let's say you have some thought that you want to put out there, and you start to type it, and as you're typing it, you go, wait a second, maybe for whatever reason you decide not to post it and you delete it. So this app is basically looks like a social media platform, except it's completely private. It's very solitary. So like you can make your posts and shows up in a timeline, but the only one who can see them is you, unless you decide to share the contents of them to some other social media platform like Twitter or whatever.
All right, so it is like a distribution center at the end.
Could be if you want it to. It's basically Twitter, but it's only you.
Private.
So you can say whatever you want. And it's the only person who can see it is you. So you can think of it in a couple of different ways. You can think of it as kind of like a journaling kind of an app, but because of the way it looks like a social media app, so it encourages a different kind of thinking when you use it. You could look at it as a sort of a screener for social media posts, where it's like, okay, let me type up this post and see what it looks like and see how I think about it when I see it in like a timeline. Before I go and I actually post it on social media where people can really see it and interact with it. Yeah. You can think about it in a bunch of different ways. The other things I'm working on right now are a client app for the Mastodon social network platform. If you're not familiar with it, it's pretty much open source Twitter. So the idea is that there's no ads. All the code is open source. More responsible or healthier maybe version of Twitter, where there's more trust in the platform. And so I'm also working, in conjunction with that, I'm sort of co-maintaining 2 packages on Pub that help facilitate the creation of Mastodon clients with Dart and Flutter. So there's Mastodon Dart, which provides just pure Dart access to the Mastodon API. So all of the entities and the endpoints and all that kind of stuff is in there. And Mastodon Flutter provides actual Flutter widgets that are helpful with creating a Mastodon app.
Okay, that sounds very interesting.
The original author of those packages was Luke Pighetti, and who was kind of initially working with me on this project that I was kind of working on early last year, and then we both kind of drifted away from it. I decided to come back to it now, and Luke made me a co-maintainer for the packages.
Okay, do you still need their new open source help?
They are open source, yes. They are all open source. So those 2 packages are on Pub. The code is open source. The code for the app that I'm working on is not available to look at yet.
Okay.
I hadn't wanted to, I hadn't wanted to put it out there until I was like sure that it was a project that I was really going to go forward with. That was last year. And again, I kind of neglected it for almost a year.
Yeah.
And now I'm kind of redoing it from scratch. It's moving forward pretty quickly because I had a pretty strong foundation, from last year.
Okay.
So the code should be, I will make it available soon.
Cool. Very good. Very good. Can you show us something from your projects?
Sure. I think a good thing to demonstrate would be how I use block.
Okay.
The block state management pattern. There's always a lot of questions about that.
Sure.
Just a quick description before I show it. So basically, I prefer to use the implementation for block with RxDart and Provider. I don't use the block packages on Pub. I find it easier personally just to work with RxDart straight up. Just thinking about the streams, the inputs, the outputs. I don't think there's anything wrong with those other implementations. It's just my preference. It's probably because it's how I learned to do it first.
Okay.
So I'm most comfortable and familiar with it that way.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Here is the app for Mastodon that I'm working on. This is, so far I've only got one block for it. I don't really find myself with a need at the moment to track a ton of state right now. And this block, I'm just calling it app block because it's basically just for tracking some top level state.
All
so,
right.
as I get, more fine grained, I may, add some more block classes to deal with some more specific things. But so we can see that first off, there's a constructor here.
Yep.
Where I do two things. I get instances and then I add them to this controller here, this behavior subject, and I get a stored instance URL. So basically Mastodon, I don't know that it's a requirement, but it's definitely suggested that when you build a Mastodon app, you allow the user to log into any instance that they want. So basically, the way that Mastodon works, it's not simply that there's just one version of it, an instance of it. Anyone can make their own instance of Mastodon, and they can make it public, and they can make it private, and they can make it about whatever topic they want. I provide a way for the user to do that. And so the way that I do it is I call an API that has an entire list of all of them. I take a list and I present that to the user. And, I took that logic to do all that, to at least retrieve them and put it here in the block. And so upon creation of the block, it will automatically go and fetch that list of instances as opposed to it needing to be manually done in some way.
Okay.
And also, anytime the user selects an instance URL, it will be stored locally with shared preferences for access later. So now we've got 3 controllers here. These are all behavior subjects. It's basically a fancy stream controller. I'm sure that plenty of people have heard of behavior subject before. So I manage the instances list, and I also have a controller to manage the instance of Mastodon. So we have to create, when someone is logging in to Mastodon, there has to be an object to represent Mastodon. This is part of the Mastodon Dart API. And I also have a behavior subject controller to track the user. I have one sync, an input here to get a new instance of Mastodon. And when that is done, that instance URL is stored. We return the sync. Yeah. We have another sync here for the user account. And we've got some outputs here for the instances list, the current instance of Mastodon and the current user account. We close our controllers. This is a function to get the list of Mastodon instances. We use the HTTP library to call this URL. This API is called instances.social. It includes a whole list. You can include some different parameters to specify what kind of instances you'll get. I personally don't take any dead instances or closed instances. Because some you can have them open or closed to allow users to join them or not. And so if an instance is closed, it's kind of useless to the user. So why include it?
Yeah, sure.
So we return a list of instances, which I basically used the JSON to Dart tool to create a sort of a model for what instances. And so we return the list of instances. Here's the function here to store the instance URL, base URL for the Mastodon instance, and we store it. And similar thing for retrieving it. We get it, put it in a string here. We give it a default of mastodon.social. This is pretty much like I think it's the biggest Mastodon instance. It's certainly, I think, considered to be the default one in general.
Okay.
And then we add an instance of Mastodon to our Mastodon controller. So we give it our URI, give it a WebSocket factory. This is something I'm not as clear on exactly what it is. This is Luke had initially wrote this. As I work with the library more and more, I learn more about it.
Yeah, sure, can imagine. It's always difficult if you're working in a team, right? Especially if they don't work anymore with that project or not that active anymore.
Yeah. So that's the whole block here at the moment, tracking all this top level stuff. And the way that I pass it down is through provider. I have a multi-provider here in case I need to, pass anything else down in the future. You pass an instance of app block down, and then we can just grab it from anywhere. Just quickly, so we have a landing screen here. Got an instance of app block to define right here. I suppose. So we get the app block from the provider. I pass it into a stream builder. I've got two things zipped up here into one stream. I've got the instances list, and I've got the current version of Mastodon. And I use a package here called search choices, which basically takes a list and allows you to select things from a list, whether it's in a sort of a pop-up or whatever it is, and it will automatically search that list for you as you type. So I don't have to deal with search and filtering and all that kind of stuff. It all just comes out of the box that way. When someone selects an instance, we determine the selection, whether if it's null or not, and then we will add a new instance of Mastodon to our block every time they select it, because let's say you're typing mastodon.social, but then you decide you want to log into mastodon.technology. So we would create our new instance and add it to the block as you go. It's kind of just a basic way that I use that. Yeah.
Very good prepared. What I really like is that we can see here that block and provider is not exclusive. So you can use both together, which I always try to emphasize, because a lot of people think, oh, provider is one thing and you can only use it. And the other one, people think, block is the only thing. But they are working really good together, which we could really good see in your project right now.
Yeah, I saw there was a post in the subreddit just the other day. I didn't look at it, but I get notifications of all new posts just to make sure that everything is going fine in there.
Yeah.
And there was someone asking, if there's anyone really using provider in like a large scale project. We get a lot of questions about that kind of thing.
Yeah. So you are also part of the Flutter Dev moderator team of the subreddit. So what are your challenges there, and what are your tasks there?
So tasks first, just kind of to make sure that everything is kind of going smoothly. People are following the rules. We try to keep an orderly subreddit. We are not like super heavy-handed, about it, but we just try to make sure that nothing wild is going on.
Yeah, sure.
And we try to make sure that the rules are followed as much as possible. In terms of what people post. So this is on the subreddit. I'm also a co-moderator of the Flutter Dev Discord group. It's just associated. So it's for the subreddit. It's really pretty much just like that. Things are posted according to rules. We'll get just an example. Someone posting, "Hey, I need some help. Can someone help me?" And it's like, well, we have a weekly questions thread, and you could probably post some questions there. We have a rule. We have another rule that so anything that covers like super basics of Flutter. If it's a tutorial or an article or something, shouldn't be posted, because there's such a huge library of of pre-existing articles and videos and things like that. So it's kind of like, people can already find that kind of stuff. We want the content to be a little bit more varied. So, just basic things like that.
Yeah.
Making sure that people aren't posting spam.
Do you like it?
Things like that. Yeah, I enjoy it. I really, the way I got started with Flutter after watching those videos from Google I/O was immediately I went on Reddit and I searched for Flutter, and I found the Flutter Dev subreddit and jumped on the Discord group, and the rest is history. So I am very fond of our community. I owe a lot to it, and so I find it very gratifying to give back to it. Yeah. And in the Discord group, it's kind of the same, but a little bit different in more the sense of we've got specific channels for specific topics, and we've got, channel headers that describe what those channels are for and what should be posted in those, and we have a rules channel that people are able to go and read the rules. And unfortunately, it's not read most of the time. So it's really just kind of just reminding people of, hey, this is what's going on. And again, really not so heavy-handed about it. It's more just kind of gentle nudging of being like, hey. But again, I'm very fond of our community. I think in general, it's very supportive. And the broader Flutter community as well is very supportive and very warm, very happy to help keep it that way.
Yeah, it's really a good community. Do you still search new moderators for the channels?
We have not brought in a new moderator for quite some time. Okay. I think the last person we brought in was Brandon Diamond, who works at Google.
Makes sense.
I think that's the last person. That was maybe a year ago.
I also read that you have contributed to the Flutter project itself. So can you tell me a bit about that experience? So how does it work? And would you recommend that other people would join that behavior and also do help with the open source of Flutter?
Sure. It was definitely kind of an intimidating prospect. So, because I had never tried to set up the Flutter source for development on it. It's like it's a different kind of environment, than just making an app.
Yeah.
So like for example, when I opened up the repo in my IDE for the first time, there was just errors everywhere. Yeah. It was just red lines everywhere. It was like it was pretty overwhelming, and I was just like, it should be working already. What is all this, right? So it's, there's a certain amount of setup for that environment required. So that's a bit daunting. But the reason why I did it was because this was kind of when Flutter Desktop was fresher, So it's been out for a while. Obviously, there's only alpha support for it now, but it was in the public consciousness, it was still pretty new. So I was trying to work with it, and I found that, so I have a Windows machine, I don't have a Mac. And Windows doesn't get as much love as Macs do.
Yeah, I learned that the hard way.
Yeah. So Windows has its own challenges. I'm sure that's why. Yeah. But yeah. So like, I was a little frustrated at the lack of coherent or really any error messaging at all. So like, how if you start an Android app and it tells you starting this and doing this, and it kind of like takes you down in the output logs of what's going on.
Yeah.
And for Windows, it pretty much gave you one line for when you're building your app and one line for when it fails, and just saying something like app failed. And I'm like, okay, that doesn't help. So I went in and did some digging for where those error messages were made, and I was in discussions with some people on the Flutter team itself to try and figure out how I could get a more verbose log message available to users. And it ended up at the time that it wasn't quite, the ability to do that wasn't quite there. And the best thing to do was to be able to tell users, hey, your build failed, run your app in verbose mode, and then you should be able to try and figure out what's going on.
Okay.
So I updated that message and opened a pull request, and it got merged.
Cool. Very good.
And I definitely would recommend that people do it, even though it is kind of intimidating and kind of daunting, because it's a worthwhile experience, I think. Even if you're not successful in what it is that you've set out to do, I think it's worth having the experience anyway. I think that any kind of experience is valuable in the kind of work that we do, programming in general. And I think that getting your feet wet with anything is worth a shot. So I definitely would recommend doing it, especially if you have something in particular in mind that you want to add or fix, and don't hesitate to ask for help with it. Again, this is one of the things that's really great about our community, again, is how warm and supportive it is, and should never feel like you are alone in a particular endeavor. You can always ask for help. The art of asking questions aside, that's a whole different topic, but definitely don't hesitate to ask for help.
Cool. That is really true. As I said, the community is really great from Flutter, and that is amazing. Maybe one question again from the side from me personally. How do you get your newest Flutter news? Because I read that now a lot in Twitter and everything, and I searched for it, and to be honest, I see all the time the tickers of the releases of Flutter, but somehow I don't know what they are doing. And if I read it, it's most of the time very, deep technical. So I have no idea what exactly happens. So where do you get your news? So if you want to know, okay, what's going on?
So the way that I do that is I try to be in as many places as possible.
Okay.
Which is why people see me everywhere. But yeah, I don't have enough time, unfortunately, to do it the way that I was initially. But I still try to keep up as much as I can. So I make sure that I'm following all the most relevant accounts on Twitter. Anytime anyone who crosses my feed, who seems like they've got something significant to offer the community, something clever, something fresh, I follow them. I make sure to follow as many people as I can. And so that's first of all. Second of all, I'm in the subreddit, I'm in the Discord group, I'm in the Flutter study group Slack channel. These are the things that I kind of like don't have as much time for as I used to, but I used to every day, at least once, go and look at the commits on the master branch for Flutter. And I used to just take a look and see if there was anything that kind of jumped out at me. And I also would go to Pub and I would take a look through every new package and every updated package for the day.
Yeah.
So besides for all the official Flutter accounts and, and the community people, going and looking at what's actually happening in the code and in the package repositories, I find a good way to kind of see what's going on. Because like if there's a package that you like using, I kind of like treat it like the developer itself. Like if there's plenty of developers out there who I'm just fascinated with their content and the stuff that they're able to do. And so besides for, just following them and seeing what they say, going and looking at their work and seeing what they're actually doing with their work, is a good way. And also, again, with the actual Flutter source code itself, if you want to know how development is going, it's all out there in the open, and they've got GitHub projects that you can go look at, those project boards. You can go look at the issues. There's a lot of really great ways to go and try and be on top of everything with what's going on in our world. Again, it takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of time if you want to really, really be like have your finger on the pulse with what's going on.
Yeah, so it's a good thing at the development of Flutter, right? We get all the newest stuff, but also we have the disadvantage that we have to inform us in a very broad way, right?
Yeah, so this is a good way to try to sort of pick out specific areas that you want to stay on top of.
And now the last question for today. You are now working since 2 years in Flutter, and what I would like to know is, what is your main takeaway? What did you like the most about the time?
The two things I love the most about Flutter are the development experience and the community. So the thing that hooked me was the promise of the wonderful development experience. I was watching those live streams. I was watching, Philip Horacek, and I was watching, Emily Fortuna, give up and give those talks, and Matt Sullivan, and all the people who were there originally on the DevRel team. I saw them get up and give their talks, and saw the hot reload, and I saw the promise of the develop an app for Android and iOS simultaneously off of one code base, and just all that kind of stuff coming from the experience I had making a native Android app a couple of months prior. That experience was very painful. Right after that, going and seeing, here's this thing that promises to completely wipe away all of those, pain points was just mind blowing. So the promise of that kind of experience hooked me. Obviously that experience, the promise delivered. So that helped to keep me around, but also the community itself, again, being so warm and being so supportive and patient, and just meeting so many amazing people. That's what kept me around, and what's really broadened and deepened my love for this tool.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It was an amazing time. Thank you for all the insights into all the things. I'm really looking forward to see all the stuff that you will work on in the next futures. And as you know, everyone, down in this description, you will find all the necessary links. So make sure that you follow GroovinChip on Twitter and of course on your YouTube channel. Thank you for watching today and have a great day. See ya.
Bye, everyone.